How long has it been since you felt a level of contagious, infectious, unflappable, unstoppable happiness? Well, maybe your answer is all the time. If so, God bless you. But if you're like most folks, the answer is, well, it's been a while. I used to be happy, but then life took its toll. Joy can seem like such a fragile thing, here one day and then scattered tomorrow by the winds of a storm. Still, we keep searching for it, but fewer of us are finding it. So, what's the answer? How can we make happiness happen in our lives? I think the findings of a study conducted a few years ago sheds light on the subject. A team of researchers found that happy people devote their time to family and friends and nurture those relationships. They are also the first to help others. Are you seeking joy? Then do good for someone else. Happiness happens when you give it away. Jesus' words were spot on when he said, "It is better to give than receive." Now, he was accused of many things, but he was never described as a grump. People didn't groan when he appeared or duck for cover when he entered the room. He spoke candidly about sin and death and the needs of the human heart, but he did so with hope. He brought joy to the people of first century Palestine, and he has enlisted you and me to bring joy to the people of this generation. Not an easy task. The people in our world are moody, fickle, and stubborn, and that just describes my wife's husband. If we are going to find the joy that comes through giving it away, we need a plan. Fortunately, the Bible has a lot to say about finding joy and the act of sharing it. The New Testament contains 59 one another statements that serve as practical principles for making happiness happen. I've grouped them in this study into a list of 6. In this session, we start with one of the most basic of these principles, but also one that serves as a gateway to the others. It's the principle of accepting one another. One of the most difficult relationship questions is what to do with your opposite you. You know the one. It's the person with whom you fundamentally disagree. You drive a hybrid, he chugs around in a gas-guzzling truck. You vote red, she votes blue. You follow different value systems. You embrace different philosophies. You adhere to different codes of behavior. Your opposite you can drain your joy tank and create tension, especially if the person is your next-door neighbor, boss, or, as in the story we are about to hear, your co-worker.
So several years ago, I had just had a brand new baby. I think she was 4 months old when we found out that my mom was sick. And very quickly, she went just from us finding out that she was sick, and she passed away. I was also in a new job that year, so it was new job, new baby. My mom had just passed away. I was trying to be there as support for my family, who was also dealing with all that at the same time, trying to, be there for my own little family with my new baby. And it was a lot to take on from a day-to-day basis. Just my mom was very close to me, and so to not have her support or even to be able to call her and ask her questions on what am I supposed to do with my daughter, I didn't have that outlet. It was really hard to have that happiness that I should have had at that time. It was hard for me to be that happiness for other people, to share that happiness. It was a dark time where I wish I could have had that joy about that time in my life with my daughter. I would describe my job as pretty stressful and a pretty hefty amount of work. So I threw myself into my work, and I had a lot of responsibilities, and so I was spending a lot of time just working and writing and doing the things that I needed to do to just get my job done. Well, actually in this job, I do have to collaborate quite a bit with other people. And that goes very well with people who like to follow my schedule and get things done on my timeline, with people that weren't as easy to work with, not making their timelines or making my life more difficult. I feel like it's just in my personality to pull back and just not interact with them as much. That's typically what I did with, some coworkers that didn't exactly mesh with the way that I tended to work. I had a specific coworker who was a little bit difficult to work with. We were responsible for projects together, and I found myself, pulling a lot of the weight. I really felt like it was a huge drain on me, and any little bit of joy that I had left, they were kind of just squashing that. It was really hindering any little bit of happiness that I had.
It's hard to know the best way to respond to the people who represent your opposite you. Do you ignore them, leave the room when they enter so you don't say something you later regret? Do you share a meal and discuss your differences? Do you dismiss your differences? How do you find and show acceptance towards someone when you'd rather show them the door? Allison was certainly struggling with this question. I think the answer can be found in this admonition. Accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. Accept one another. 3 powerful words. But what instruction is Paul actually giving us? Well, the verb he uses for accept means more than merely tolerate or coexist with someone. It means to welcome the person into your fellowship. Paul used it when he urged Philemon to welcome the slave Onesimus as he would welcome the apostle. Luke selected it to describe the hospitality of the Maltese to the shipwrecked. Most notably, Jesus used it to describe the manner in which he receives us. While Jesus doesn't accept our sinful behavior, he always accepts us as his wayward children. He doesn't tell us to clean up before we come in, but neither does he consent to leave us in our messed up state. Rather, the Gospels tell us that he is full of grace and truth. Acceptance seeks to offer both. After all, if we offer only grace, we gloss over the truth. If we offer only truth, then we dismiss the joy of grace. Our goal is to strike a balance. Oh, but if only the balance were easy to strike. The catchphrase, hate the sin and love the sinner, fits nicely on a bumper sticker, but how do we embed the principle into our hearts? I think it begins by reserving judgment. Let every person you meet be a new person in your mind. None of this labeling or preconceived notions. Pigeonholes work for pigeons, but not for people. Raleigh Washington, an African-American minister who has dedicated his life to racial reconciliation, says the most important phrase in bridge building is this: help me understand what it's like to be you. Ask the person to help you understand what it's like to be a teenager in this day and age, or the challenges he faces as an immigrant, or what it's like for her to be a female in a gray flanneled corporation. And then sit back and listen. Really listen. Don't use the pause in the conversation as an opportunity to reload for the next point you'll fire off. Peter wrote, be in agreement, understanding each other, loving each other as family, being kind and humble. You're never called to redeem the world. Savior of humanity is not on your job description, so resign from the role. To do otherwise is to sentence yourself to a lifetime of misery. Happiness happens not by fixing people, but by accepting them and entrusting them into God's care. Now, Jesus did this. Otherwise, he could not have endured what he did. No one knew humankind's hypocrisy and failings more than he. He knew exactly what people needed, yet he gave them time and space to grow. We are wise to do likewise, to reserve our judgments against them, and while we are at it, we are wise to resist the urge to shout at them. It seems to me there is a lot of shouting going on in our society today. on the airwaves, shouting, on the bumper stickers, shouting, in the workplaces like Allison's, shouting. There are an awful lot of opinions out there that people feel awfully compelled to voice. In the end, it just turns out awful. This is especially true on social media, where rage and disrespect is taken to a whole new level. We post words on the internet that we would never say to a person's face. The online banter blisters and bruises. The rudeness has reached the point where I think we could all relate to the sign I once saw in a medical lab. If you are grouchy, rude, impatient, or inconsiderate, there will be a $10 charge just for putting up with you. Shouting at the opposite you feels good, but does it do any good? The Apostle Paul was critical of the person who is full of pride and understands nothing, but is sick with the love for arguing and fighting about words. This brings jealousy and fighting, speaking against others. Instead, he advised, do not argue about opinions. It's one thing to have an opinion, it's something else to have a fight. So when you sense the volume increasing and the heat rising, close your mouth. It's better to keep quiet and keep a friend than to be loud and lose one. Above all things, Peter says, have fervent love among yourselves, for love shall cover a multitude of sins. If love covers a multitude of sins, can it not cover a multitude of opinions? We need intermezzos of calm in this cacophony of opinions. We need to treat one another with respect. We need to take the time to get to know the other person before we pass judgment. Often this starts just by walking across the room to greet the other person. It starts by noticing the new kid in class and saying hello, or pausing at the desk of the receptionist and saying, "Good morning," or refusing to hurry through a checkout line without a genuine "good afternoon" for the cashier. Simple steps, but important ones that make a difference. Why? Because we never know when such a gesture will touch a heart. Perhaps that's why Paul suggested in another of the one another verses to simply greet one another. Notice he didn't say greet the people you like or greet the people you know. No, he says greet one another. No selective greetings allowed, no picking and choosing. You may carry a canteen of water, but you don't know who is thirsty. For that reason, you are called to offer it to everyone. So don't dismiss the value of a sincere salutation. Our Master was seldom more practical than when he said, when you knock on a door, be courteous in your greeting. Happiness happens when you show the other person that he or she matters, even if the other person represents the opposite you. Even more, the Bible says, as you greet that person and show acceptance, you demonstrate the love of Christ. Were Jesus to enter a room, every eye would turn and every person would stand. People would wait in line for the chance to hold his hands and touch his feet. According to Jesus, you have that opportunity every day. Remember his words in the Gospel of Matthew to a group of people he called blessed. I was a stranger and you made me feel welcome. And his words to the group he told to depart from him, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. When you greet that nervous teenager in the back of the class, you greet Jesus. When you make the single parent who works down the hall feel accepted, you make Jesus feel the same. And as we will see in the conclusion to Allison's story, when you reach out to that coworker who can be just a thorn in your side, you just might give them a glimpse of Christ.
I think I just got to the point where I realized that if there was going to be joy in my life, I had to be a joyful person. And so I think it was around Valentine's Day or Easter or something, some candy-giving holiday. So I thought, who doesn't like candy? So I went and bought a bunch of candy and thought I would give it to my coworkers. So, of course, first, I go to the coworkers I like. And I go and give them some candy, and I went around the office and gave it out. I walked past the conference room, and I saw a coworker I wasn't particularly very fond of. And I thought, well, maybe he needs some joy. So I went back, and I just laid some candy on the table. And he looked at me. He said, "Is this a joke?" And we both got a chuckle, and I sat down for a moment, and we just talked very civilly. And it was a nice moment, I think, for the both of us to kind of let our guards down and be kind to each other, and not be concerned with work, but be sharing an experience, of joy with each other. And it made me feel better to be a person who can, no matter what's going on, just kind of drop my guard and offer kindness towards someone else. So it's not like this was this huge earth-shattering experience where it changed my life or it changed his life, but I think it was impactful for the both of us to just have something very small that brought a little kindness, a little happiness to both of our lives. And really that's something that I could and should be doing on a normal basis, for people that are in and out of my life every day. Just the unexpected, easy little things that you can do for someone, just to spread happiness.
A survey was once conducted in which Americans were asked which words they would most like to hear. The first two responses are ones you might guess: "I love you" and "I forgive you." But the third most popular response might surprise you: "Supper's ready." Those three phrases summarize Jesus' message. He came with love, he came with grace, and he also came with a dinner invitation. To those whom society had judged and shunned, he said, "Come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." To those who criticized his association with less than perfect people, he said, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick." And to those in need of mercy, he extended it as well. And his call to you and me is to go and do likewise.